So today, what I want to talk to you about, just a couple of thoughts, some things I was going through. And so first, let's look at Genesis, pull it up here, chapter 4. And in Genesis chapter 4, we have the story of Cain killing Abel. So we understand that well. And I want to start at the end of this and kind of go through it and just kind of paint a picture to some things. Connect this to Jasher and good, they're saying the sound's good. Um, with Jasher and Enoch, and then kind of pull some other things in. So in this case, we have Genesis chapter 4, starting in verse 13. It says that Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear." So Cain has killed Abel. God has went and talked with him, and he's been kicked out of the land. He has to go to Nod and live, which is east of Eden, or a place that will become known as Nod, east of Eden. And Cain says to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me out this day from the face of the earth, from the face, from your face I shall be hid. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that every one who finds me will slay me." So let me get out of that here real quick. And let's see. Verse 15, the Lord said to him, "Therefore, whoever slays Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him." So in this particular case, Cain saying that I killed Abel, I killed him, I'm a murderer, I did it on purpose, I was angry, but people will find me and want to kill the murderer. And so he puts this concept on him. So if anyone kills Cain, he gets 7 times the punishment. So it's a protection for Cain. Cain is firstborn of Adam. Cain's going to have a lot of children. He has time to repent if he does. And of course, we know he doesn't. So it says, Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod, east of Eden. People ask a lot of times where the land of Nod is and how come it was already named at this point. This is Moses writing in 2400 AM, so 2400 and some years after this event happened. And what became the land of Nod is where he went and colonized. It's on the eastern side of Eden. So wherever Eden's at, he goes east, and that's the land. And then it says, Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch. And he built a city and called the name of the city after his son Enoch. Now, this is not the Enoch that writes the Book of Enoch or the prophet. This is a different Enoch. Now, what's interesting, a lot of people say, well, where did Cain get his wife? According to the ancient histories, it was his sister. Her name was Awen. So basically, in the first generations, you only have brothers and sisters to do that kind of stuff. Later on, you can go to cousins and on down like that. So Adam and Eve are the first two and the only two people. They have a series of sons and daughters, and then that generation has sons and daughters, and it goes on from there. So Enoch, we're going to look at the genealogy of Enoch because that's rarely looked at. We almost always just look at the genealogy of Seth and go down to Noah. Let's see here. So it says that to Enoch was born Irad, to Irad Methuselah. Methuselah begot Methusiel. These are all names very similar to the Seth lineage. And Methuselah begot Lamech. Now there is a Lamech or Lamech that is Noah's dad. And this is a different one. So you've got two genealogies. Sometimes the names are very similar. There are two Namas. One is someone from Cain's lineage who was not a very good person. Canaanites generally, or Cainites rather, generally were not. The other one became Noah's wife. So Noah's wife was his great aunt, I think, at that time on back. So Nama and Noah get married. This is a different Nama. Lamech has Noah. It's Noah's father. This is a different Lamech. And then there's Methuselah, which is Enoch's son, and that's different from this person. So it says Lamech had two wives. The two wives, the name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other was Zillah. And it says, to Ada bare Jabal, who was the father of all that dwell in tents, and such as have cattle. And his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all that such that handle the harp and the organ. Zillah bare Tubal-Cain, the instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. Notice the very beginning here we have iron, and we'll get back to that in a second. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. So again, this Naamah is not Noah's wife. It's a different one. So, and it goes down, and then there's some things that happen. So at this point, I want to stop and just kind of look at a little bit of this. And it's an interesting thing to look at. We have, starting with Cain, and then we have generation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 just named. And then we kind of stop, and we're talking about Jubal and Zillah and Naamah and Tubal-Cain. So there's something special about these people that it's not recorded in Genesis. So we wanted to kind of look at that. So let's stop there for a second. And what we'll do is go to the Book of Jasher. So here is the section about Cain and Tubal-Cain. So this is one of the things that we'll see in a little bit. It says when Canaan, now we have Adam, and on the godly side we have Adam who has Seth, who has Canaan. So this is a good Canaan. So Cain and Abel, Cain kills Abel, Cain is exiled. So now Adam kind of starts over, Seth, and then Canaan. When Canaan was 70 years old, he begot 3 sons and 2 daughters. Not that it was quintuplets or anything, but that's when he started having children. The names of the children were, the firstborn was Mahalalel, and we see that in Genesis also, Cain and Mahalalel goes on down. But the second was Enan, the third was Mered, and his sisters were Ada and Zillah. So that's kind of important. So we get to see there's a little bit of crossing of the two lines, the Sethites and the Canaanites. So these are the 5 children of Canaan that were born to him. Lamech, the son of Methuselah, became related to Canaan by marriage when he took the 2 daughters for his wives. So we've got Adam, Seth, Canaan. Canaan's 2 daughters were, or 2 of his daughters, were Ada and Zillah. Now Lamech on Cain's side then is going to take those 2. Let me check real quick here and see if there's a okay, just want to make sure there was no problem with anything. And let's see here. So Lamech became married to Canaan, or married Ada and Zillah. Okay, so Ada conceived and bare a son to Lamech, whose name was Jabal. We just saw that in Genesis. Zillah, her sister, was barren in those days and had no offspring. This is interesting history behind the scenes. And so this is the very first time this kind of thing started. So in those days, it says Zillah was barren because in those days the sons of men began to trespass against God and trespassed against his commandments, which he had commanded Adam, namely to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. Some of the sons of men caused their wives to drink a draught that would render them barren, in order that they may retain their figures and thereby their beautiful appearance may not fade. And the sons of men caused, when the sons of men caused some of their wives to drink, Zillah drank with them. And the childbearing women appeared abominable in the sight of the husbands as widows, while their husbands lived. For the barren ones only, to the barren ones only were they attracted. So this is a really good example of the very first herbal medicine being used to kill. At the end of days and years, so sometime later on in years, Zillah became old, and the Lord opened her womb. She conceived and bare a son who called his name Tubal-Cain, saying, I have withered away, but I have obtained him from Almighty God. She conceived again and bore a daughter whose name was Naamah. And again, this is not the Naamah that was Noah's wife, but the other one. For she said, after I had withered away, I have obtained pleasure and delight. And Lamech was old and advanced in years, and his eyes were dim. So this is the situation. So he's got these two wives. One's barren, one's not. And again, this looks weird, and people say this is the first polygamy, but the way this has always been from the days of old is that it's one man for one woman for life. So in this case, this is the part. Now let's flip back to Genesis. So let's see here. So Cain had Lamech. Lamech took two wives, Ada and Zillah. Oh, and basically what I was saying is that the old way of doing this is that you're supposed to have a firstborn child to carry on the lineage. So it's supposed to be one man for one woman for life. And the way that the exception is that, of course, if your wife dies, you have no kids, you're supposed to take another wife. But if you have a wife, you try to have kids and it doesn't work, then you take a second wife just to make sure you can have an heir, a firstborn son. If neither one of them can get pregnant, it's not them, it's you. And so there's no sense of going any further. So that's been the case all the way through. We see Abraham doing the same thing. So it's not necessarily that he did anything wrong, because we've already seen that Zillah was barren. Or, we don't know the whole story for that one, but that's basically the way the ancients used to do things. So it says that Lamech took two wives. The name of the one was Ada and the other was Zillah. And let me just jump up here. Ada bare Jubal, the father dwell in tents, and all that have cattle. His brother's name was Jubal, and he was the father of all those that handle the harp and the organ. So music. Uh, Zillah also bare Tubal Cain, the instructor of every artificer in brass and iron, and his sister was Naamah. Now Lamech said to his two wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken to my speech, for I have slain a man to my hurt, or to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain will be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech will be avenged sevenfold. Because he didn't do it in anger, it was an accident, which we'll see here in a little bit. And then it goes on and says Adam knew his wife again, and then they have Seth, and then Seth goes to Enos, and then those things. So this particular thing here, people look at this and say, what in the world is the story about this? Well, it finishes up in here by saying that, and here it starts in verse 26. So this part right here. It says, Lamech was old and advanced in years. His eyes were dim that he could not see. And Tubal-Cain, his son, was with him. Tubal-Cain was young, but not like a child, just a young man. And remember, back in these days, when you lived to be 6, 7, 800 years old, a young man may be a few hundred years old. So his son Tubal-Cain was leading him. One day Lamech went to the field, and Tubal-Cain, his son, was with him. While they were walking in the field, Cain, the son of Adam, advanced towards them. For Lamech was very old and could not see much. So Tubal-Cain, his son, was still young. And Tubal-Cain told his father to draw the bow, and shot arrows and smote Cain, who was yet afar off, and he slew him, for he appeared to them, both of them, to be an animal. So it was a hunting accident. The arrows entered Cain's body, and though he was distant from them, he fell to the ground and died. And the Lord requited Cain's evil according to his wickedness, which he had done to his brother Abel, according to the word of the Lord which he had spoken. And it came to pass that when Cain died, Lamech and Tubal went to see the animal that they had slain, and they saw, and behold, Cain, their grandfather, was fallen dead upon the earth. And Lamech was very much grieved at having done this. Clapping his hands together, he struck his son and caused his death. So that somehow he struck him, they fell over, and so two people died that day. Now, the wives of Lamech heard what Lamech had done, and they sought to kill him. So they thought he was a murderer. So the wives of Lamech hated him from that day forward, because he slew Cain and Tubal-Cain. The wives of Lamech separated from him and would not hearken to him in those days. Lamech came to his two wives and pressed them to listen to him about the matter. And he said to his two wives, Ada and Zillah, to hear my voice, wives of Lamech, attend to my words. For now you have imagined and said that I slew a man with my words, and a child with my stripes, for having done me no violence. But surely I am old and gray-haired, my eyes are heavy through age, and I did this thing unknowingly. A hunting accident is not something you execute someone for. And the wives of Lamech listened to him in this matter. They returned to him with the advice of their father Adam, and but they bore no more children for him from that time forward. And it goes on with this. So this is the basic story behind that particular thing. Now, when we go back to Scripture, again, we have this whole situation going here with him being avenged. Now, the interesting thing about this is an incident that happened. Obviously, when Cain died, this was many, many years or maybe even a few centuries after Ada and Zillah had kids. So one of the questions is, why do we have a direct lineage down here, and then we stop and let everyone know that there was Tubal-Cain, there was Naamah, there was Jubal, and there was Jabal, and the specific things. It almost sounds like Jabal invented tents, okay? And Jubal invented the harp and the organ. And Tubal-Cain invented how to take the metal from the ground and make weapons. And so all of this stuff is really interesting. So with this in mind, the question is, it would be interesting that everybody didn't know anything, and all of a sudden one family out of the blue has a bunch of children that are geniuses, and they invent everything. So with that in mind, let's go to the Book of Enoch. So in the Book of Enoch, we have the story of the Watchers, the giants, and the 200 angels that fell. So basically, we have the story that's given that Azazel is an angel. He came to Earth specifically to like recreate things in his own image. He took a wife. He started doing genetic experiments. Kind of kept to himself. Didn't change much. Nothing really happened, except over in his area wherever he was at. So this led an angel by the name of Shemyaza and 200 other angels to come down to do the exact same thing. They really messed up bad. And so the whole sin was um, placed on Azazel. And there's a whole history behind all that. But so here's the situation. In chapter 6, we have the descent of the 200s. This is in the Book of Enoch, chapter 6 to 16 is all of the Nephilim history, the Nephilim clans, the Civil War, how all that stuff happened. But I just wanted to look at a couple of things. So the main leader here is Shemyaza, and then several of the others. So when we get down to 7, I want to look at 7 and 8 and look at them specifically. Excuse me. So each of the 200, each of the angels that came down then, so there's Azazel, he's off doing his own thing, and these are the 200. Each one chose a wife for himself and began to go to them, mate with them, and they taught them sorcery and enchantments, the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. The women became pregnant, and gave birth to great giants. So what I want to show you here is interesting is, so they come to earth, they take their wives, and of course you want your wives and your children to have superior weapons, to have the superior food, to have a better way of protecting themselves. You want them to be successful above all others. But since we're talking about sorcery and enchantments, and then the cutting of roots and being acquainted with plants. So I want to draw your attention to this. First, I want to ask the question, why is cutting of roots and plants, whether you're making dye for paint, for makeup, um, some sort of herbal medicine, or whatever it is you're doing with it, making glue, why would that be a big deal? And of course, it wouldn't. So keep that in mind, but somehow they make it into a big deal. So then they have their kids. And when we get down to chapter 8, we have the forbidden teachings. So Azazel, that was the first angel that came down, taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and armor from the metals of the earth. Now in Genesis, we have the first human being, or at least the first descendant of Cain, to make metal and armor and swords and things out of metal, um, was Tubal Cain. So there's got to be a connection here. So we're going to see here it was in the days of Jared that these angels descended. So Jared is Enoch's father. And there's a lot of history about him and those kind of things. But basically, this is the time period on which it happens. And again, I would submit, and this is something I've thought about for a long time, but all of us, or a lot of us up here anywhere, carry a gun for protection. It's our constitutional right to do. If you're in the police force, you might use a bulletproof vest. That's our equivalent of a shield. We might have alarm systems in our home. We have locks that we bolt the door with. So there's nothing really wrong with protecting yourself. And if someone really wants to kill you, you need weapons to protect yourself. So the whole idea of having swords, policemen have weapons and shields and stuff, knives, shields, and armor. Specifically the armor. The armor can't hurt anybody. It's completely protective. So why would making armor be a bad thing? And of course it wouldn't. So keep that in mind. He taught women how to see behind them. In other words, he invented the mirror. You can always look at water and get a reflection, but to actually create a mirror that you could look at and see, yourself. So it was as an invention of Azazel. So he made a mirror, taught them how to make mirrors, how to make bracelets, ornaments, and all kinds of jewelry using precious stones, the beautifying of the eyes for makeup and various colors. Now, again, everyone, and even anciently in Israel, used makeup. The ladies always used makeup, especially if you have some sort of a deformity. The makeup may help a little, or some sort of covering or whatever. But notice this. It said nothing wrong with makeup per se, nothing wrong with mirrors, nothing demonic or anything about it, but it led them astray into fornication and ungodliness to become corrupt in all their ways. So I just want you to think about this for a minute. They could have become fornicators and ungodly whether they had the makeup or not. So again, what is the shields and the swords and the mirrors and the makeup? What is the story behind it? Is what I'm getting to. Now look at this last part here. It says Semyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings. Now I'm not sure exactly what enchantments are. When we get to like Deuteronomy 10, there's a list of things like enchanters and wizards and necromancers and things like that. And the rabbis have a detailed description of what the Canaanite version of those things are. And that's an interesting study in itself. But something to enchant is to like to change someone's demeanor. So if there's an animal that doesn't normally attack and you corner it, or I get it to where you walk in on it and I make some really loud bangs, I might get it to attack you. Or if an animal is getting ready to attack and somehow music calms it down. So something along those lines as far as what enchant, if it's the same thing as the Canaanite version. But anyway, root cuttings. Basically, you're taking certain plants and taking the roots of them for whatever reason. This could be, again, for dyes like the makeup, could be the herbal medicine. Now, we're not supposed to commit sorcery, which is altering the mind with drugs, but we do use medicine. And the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about herbal medicine books, things like that. You don't want someone that's dying to be in pain for days and days. You want them out of pain, if at all possible. And if there's an herb or something that fixes the ailment, you want to heal them. So, root cuttings. Amaros, another angel, taught how to resolve enchantments. So whatever this is that Shemyaza taught, he taught the opposite, how to do the opposite. So for instance, if I create something and make a poison, and then you eat it and you die, this guy might do the antidote for the poison, or something along those lines. It wouldn't have anything to do with makeup, but it's some sort of enchantment, root cutting, something. So Bakriel taught astrology. Now, if it's astrology like we understand, trying to tell the future or some sort of a pagan structure, we'd understand why that would be definitely wrong. If it's astronomy in general, the courses of the sun, moon, and the stars, again, you kind of wonder why. Kokabel, and this is interesting, the word El means God, and Kokav is the Hebrew word for star. So this is like the god of the stars. You may have just taken that name. But he taught the constellations or the signs. So again, nothing wrong with learning the constellations. Timrel taught the knowledge of clouds, and we're not sure exactly what that is either, but some form of astrology. And another guy taught the courses of the moon, the sun, the stars, things like that. And all mankind rather began to perish when they cried out of heaven. So here's my thought. It's not so much that someone taught them, and whoever, but taught them how to make armor or how to make makeup or about the moon phases or how to calculate things with the stars or astrology or astronomy anyway. But what they did was collectively took this information and reshaped everything. So, for instance, we've learned from the Essenes that the original calendar is the same one in Genesis, but it's a solar calendar, not a lunar one. So it always starts at the spring equinox of that year and goes forward. So, and there was a prophecy that somewhere along the line that the Pharisees or some of the Jews would come along and pervert the calendar. And you and I are thinking again, why do we care? I don't care what calendar you use. When it's springtime, we plant stuff, and when it's fall, we harvest and we eat our food, and who cares? But it's important to them as priests. And again, it's a way to have, I think, what Paul says is a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. It looks godly, it's a false religious system. And so we have that today. Think of a cult. Any cult that we have here in the United States is going to call itself Christian. So if you don't know anything, if you're not a Christian, you don't know anything about it, and you go to one church that is a real Christian church, they're going to talk about Christ and how you need to, be a part of their denomination and do what's right and avoid what's wrong. You go to a cult and they may teach the exact opposite things, but they're going to say they're the real Christians, they're the real ones, and you need to do it their way because everyone else is corrupt. So just because you call yourself a Christian or a patriarch or godly doesn't mean you are. And you may be a con artist or you may just be confused because of what you've been taught. So think about this then. So if you have a society that wants good things and these angels appear and they say, well, the God of heaven is left you high and dry. We can help. Number one, if you're sick, we'll show you how to make medicine. If somebody's going to attack you, we'll show you how to make swords and shields and the ones that can't be broken, you know. And then the ladies want to be beautiful, and you might even say, well, if you have a deformity, maybe we can fix that. So here's a mirror so you can see what you're doing. Here's how to make jewelry. Here's how to make, this kind of stuff. And that in itself wouldn't be a problem if they'd say, now worship God. But they turn the whole thing around. Now, if the Essenes are correct in saying that it was a solar calendar instead of a lunar one, I thought it's interesting that this guy here teaches the courses of the moon. And again, why would we care? That like the moon phases, it's every 29 and a half days to new moon or full moon to full moon. And it's fun to look at a calendar and look at moon phases and get a telescope, go outside and watch it. It's always a nice hobby to have is that kind of stuff. But on the other hand, if we say, well, the solar stuff is by a God who's weird, and I'm going to tell you the truth of things, how to figure out the real time periods, and it goes by moon phases and by astrology and constellations and enchantments and root cuttings. So 90% of this stuff is true. I mean, it's nothing made up. There really is a moon. God made it. It has phases. But if I take it and introduce new information to you and then twist it, not even so much twist the information, but say the reason you didn't know about it is because the guy up there doesn't like you very much and he's wanting to enslave you. Well, come on my side and we'll take care of things. So this is a major con from the fallen angels. And I just thought it would be kind of interesting to look at it that way. Now, if we go back to Genesis, And just look at the story again. We have um, Lamech, Cain's descendant, who takes a wife from Canaan and does not have a child, and takes another wife. She has a child, and it's not because she was normally barren, but she did too many abortions and tried to do the stuff that all the girls do, and they had problems. That would have been about the time that the fallen angels would have been teaching stuff like that. So to take an herb and cause an abortion, or to take another herb and make sure you don't have an abortion, is something that would be learned or perverted. But then Ada has Jabal, who is the father and the students. Those are idioms. So if I'm beginning to learn piano, I don't know hardly anything, and I need to go to a piano teacher and learn. I'm a student. So I am a son of the piano, just like the son of the prophets. Those are people that aren't prophets, but we just study prophecy. So you and I are the sons of prophets. We're not prophets, though. When you become a prophet or become the father of something, it means you're the master. So if you invented music or invented this new kind of flute, you are the father of it. And if I want to study it, I'm a son of it. Not that you're really my father, but it's that type of thing. So he's the father of those that dwell in tents and have cattle. So how to make cattle, breed cattle, tents, this kind of stuff. Jubal was the father of all such that handled the harp and the organ, so musical instruments. And then Tubal Cain was brass and iron, so artificer in every form of it. So tools of brass and iron, and also weapons. Well, if we put Enoch and this together, the angels begin teaching this stuff, and this is about the time when it happened in the days of Jared. And so these are I just wanted to kind of pull that out. So this is interesting. So number one, really, the only thing I wanted to show in this study is that when we look at Jasher and Enoch and some of the other texts in Genesis, we have a little more of a complete story, and more things show up. And the angels that fell, that corrupted everything pre-flood, there's a lot of other things too, but basically, much like Satan in Genesis when it said, "Has not God said that you'll eat of every tree of the fruit of the garden?" Did he really say, "The day you eat of it, you'll die, and you're not even supposed to touch it"? Did he really say that? Satan's never really lying. He's just getting you to doubt. And these guys may have actually taught real things, but they taught it in such a way as it's a different form. You could probably watch anything you want to on TV, and it probably wouldn't bother you. But if all you do is watch TV, you're not going to be studying scripture. If every night you go to bowling and then to band practice and then out to see a movie and then to do something, you're never going to have time to study scripture. So it's pretty important that we get our priorities in right. So if you go to a bad church and they're telling you it's okay to have an abortion, it's okay to do this, to fornicate, et cetera, et cetera, that is a form of godliness, but it's not godly. It would be cultic, kind of what these angels did. So just wanted to throw that out there because I don't know if you guys have ever thought of it, but I've thought of this several times. It's like, what does brass have to do with sin or not sin? And if I have a pocket knife, why is that, what was the big deal? But it's how Satan and the fallen angels use true things to corrupt you. So, okay. So, for instance, someone in your family dies when you're a young child. You may decide to become a policeman and fight for truth and justice. That would be good. You may decide to be a criminal and pay back those people that did it. So, the stuff that happens in your life and whoever talks to you and tries to train you can lead you astray or lead you into righteousness. That's what I'm getting at with this. So that's just my study for today. But we wanted to look at chapter 4 and then Jasher and Enoch. So at this place, we'll go ahead and stop. So, okay. Uh, we will be back next Monday and continue our studies from then. So thank you guys. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.